Another day, another story. It was Christmas, always a joyful and a hospitable time in the country, especially in such an old hall as our home, where quaint customs and frolics were much clung to, as part and parcel of the very dwelling itself. The hall was full of guests, so full, indeed, that there was great difficulty in providing sleeping accommodation for all. Several narrow and dark chambers in the turret's mere pigeonholes, as we irreverently called what had been thought good enough for the stately gentlemen of Elizabeth's reign, were now allotted to bachelor visitors, after having been empty for a century. All the spare rooms in the body and wings of the hall were occupied, of course, and the servants who had been brought down were lodged at the farm and at the keeper's, so great was the demand for space. At last the unexpected arrival of an elderly relative, who had been asked months before, but scarcely expected, caused great commotion. My aunts went about wringing their hands distractedly. Lady Speldhurst was a personage of some consequence. She was a distant cousin, and had been for years on cool terms with us all on account of some fancied affront or slight when she had paid her last visit, about the time of my christening. She was 70 years old, she was infirm, rich, and testy. Moreover, she was my godmother, though I had forgotten the fact, but it seems that though I had formed no expectations of a legacy in my favor, my aunts had done so for me. Aunt Margaret was especially eloquent on the subject. "There isn't a room left," she said. "Was ever anything so unfortunate? We cannot put Lady Speldhurst into the turrets, and yet where is she to sleep? And Rose's godmother, too. Poor, dear child, how dreadful. After all these years of estrangement, and with 100,000 in the funds, and no comfortable, warm room at her own unlimited disposal in Christmas, of all times in the year. What was to be done? My aunts could not resign their own chambers to Lady Speldhurst, because they had already given them up to some of the married guests. My father was the most hospitable of men, but he was rheumatic, gouty, and methodical. His sisters-in-law dared not propose to shift his quarters, and, indeed, he would have far sooner dined on prison fare than have been translated to a strange bed. The matter ended in my giving up my room. I had a strange reluctance to making the offer, which surprised myself. Was it a boding of evil to come? I cannot say. We are strangely and wonderfully made. It may have been. At any rate, I do not think it was any selfish unwillingness to make an old and infirm lady comfortable by a trifling sacrifice. I was perfectly healthy and strong. The weather was not cold for the time of the year. It was a dark, moist yule, not a snowy one, though snow brooded overhead in the darkling clouds. I did make the offer, which became me, I said with a low "Gh" as the youngest. My sisters laughed too, and made a jest of my evident wish to propitiate my godmother. "She is a fairy godmother, Rosa," said Minnie, "and you know she was affronted at your christening, and went away muttering vengeance. Here she is coming back to see you. I hope she brings golden gifts with her." I thought little of Lady Speldhurst and her possible golden gifts. I cared nothing for the wonderful fortune and the funds that my aunts whispered and nodded about so mysteriously. But since then I have wondered whether, had I then showed myself peevish or obstinate, had I refused to give up my room for the expected kinswoman, it would not have altered the whole of my life? But then Lucy or Minnie would have offered in my stead, and been sacrificed. What do I say? Better that the blow should have fallen as it did then on those dear ones. Thank you, and having you here was a privilege to me. Please support the channel by subscribing.